Students know when you care. Students know when you are sincere. Students know if you respect them. And then they will rise to the occasion if they feel those three things are in place.
Your voice matters, but you can make it matter more. Through our in-depth conversations with leaders and experts, you'll learn what it takes to move your audience with your message at home, work, and in the world. It's Compelling Communication Strategy, brought to you by your host, author, speaker, and strategist, Andrea Joy Wenburg. Welcome to Voice of Influence.
Hey, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. I am thrilled to be on the line with Doug Walters today. He is somebody that I've known for ever since I was in high school, actually. And he was an instructor at this program called the Summer Honors Program, which was a local academic camp that I participated in, and actually the place where I met my husband. So I had Doug for an instructor one year and just really enjoyed him and appreciated him. And he did it for so many years at that program. It's a really special thing. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that. But Doug, thank you so much for being here on the Voice of Influence podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea. I'm very glad to be with you today.
So, Doug, maybe we should start by telling the listener just a little bit about SHP, the Summer Honors Program.
I'll be very happy to. Well, the program, Andrea, started in 1978 as an outgrowth of trying to provide academic enrichment stimulation for students in Nebraska, especially South Central Nebraska. And I was very fortunate to have a friend of a friend who recommended me to be one of the instructors in this very intensive 2-week program in 1978.
And you weren't living in Nebraska.
No. I at that time, and still do at this point, live in Charleston, West Virginia. And so the program has grown and morphed tremendously over the last 40 years. In fact, the summer program in June ended almost toward the end of June, and the program celebrated its 40th anniversary. And I have been fortunate enough that my schedule and work life and family life was able to be there 33 out of the 40 years.
Which is amazing. So you have seen a lot of life in Nebraska at this Summer Honors Program and how it changed and how students have changed over the years and all that sort of thing, which I do want to ask you about, but maybe not quite yet.
Okay.
So what is your role at Summer Honors, or what was your role? Because you retired this year, is that right?
I did. Yeah, I felt that it was time for me to sort of hang up my boots, so to speak, so that I could give other instructors the opportunity. I taught the social sciences, Andrea, basically centered on how to do primary and secondary research. And the one thing that I had the great luxury with was that I was able to take and explore the various social sciences. So one year it may focus on sociology. The next year it could have been psychology. Many times it was on history, whether it was regional or American or world history. So I had a platform that afforded me great variety over the years. It's a very tight, as you well know, having been a student in the process, was a very, very tight 2 weeks of intensive academic focus. The students are nominated, and then they take entry exams to be admitted to the program. In fact, there are 10 academic areas in the entire SHP process. So once they are identified, the number of students that I had each year in the program varied between about 10 to 14, which was perfect, for small group discussion,
Yeah.
but yet doing teamwork. And so I was able to do that with great success in working with these wonderful, mostly rural, bright, articulate, talented high school students. And for example, this year I focused on psychology, and I'd like to get into that a little bit more later on in our discussion. But the one of the keys to the program was a very intense structure that I had students 7.5 hours a day. And for any educators, especially high school teachers that are out there listening to the podcast, you know that when you change classes every 45 to 55 minutes, depending upon the type of schedule that the high school has, you have to start up and you have to reform every day. And so once we get started in the program, we had a quality full 7 to 7.5 hours a day of concentrated work. So the contact hours usually varied between 70 and 75 hours. And boy, can you cover a lot of ground in that amount of time.
And it's so interesting because the students, once they get there, they know that it's so fun. It's a totally different kind of environment than school. And I think when you pick out those kids that are really interested in digging into a topic for a while, I mean, it's a different environment.
Yeah, yes, and it's very intense. It's really interesting. As you well know, students could go multiple years, but most students don't go more than 2 years. But when you get what we call a rookie, when she or he comes along and they see the amount of work that's going to be done, they are somewhat intimidated the first day or so. But once we get into the rhythm of the process, we found, and not just myself, but over the last 40 years, all of the instructors just really developed fine academic opportunities for these students. And in many cases, we didn't always stay in the classroom. Lots of field research, lots of field trips, and built into the entire program. Mm. And in fact, I think your brother-in-law, Chris, had the opportunity to go with me when I took a group of students to Brazil in 1999.
Yes, yeah. And why did you take them to Brazil?
Well, part of my life has been filled with a great deal of travel and interest in the history and cultures around the world. And I've been involved with an organization for about 40 years called the Partners of the Americas. And West Virginia's sister state is in a small state called Espírito Santo, which is right north of Rio de Janeiro. And we made arrangements. These students were in my class for 2 years. We made it a 2-year commitment. And so I was able, along with another teacher, the two of us took them down for 2 full weeks. And it was one of the best experiences I think I ever had. And I think the students also did that.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it really is amazing to think of taking students, to another country for 2 whole weeks. But you also did a lot of prep work the year before. And
yes.
So that's just such a deep kind of work, deep experience that I'm sure that it just had life-changing results.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, anytime that I've ever traveled internationally with students, which has been a number of times, I have found that once they had that kind of educational experience and had interactions with people from a different culture, it really changes who they are to their very core. And I've had lots of follow up with some of the students that were that was in that class in 1998 and 1999. And they will tell me that it still remains one of the highlights of their life.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, I would say that the summer honors program for me, even though I never traveled anywhere, I was there 4 years, and man, it had a significant impact on me. I think maybe part of that had to do with just the idea that you could first of all be around people who are also interested in going deep into one particular topic. Aaron and I very lovingly call it nerd camp. Um, but but really, truly, and then you go to, this place where there's a lot of other people that are interested in digging in like you, and all of a sudden it's just fun. Like there was a lot less concern about popularity and that sort of thing. Instead, it was just coming together and I mean, I say fun, even though it was a lot of work, but it felt like fun work because it's not the same as just, rote kind of memorization and things like that.
Right. Well, of course, one of my personal educational philosophies is what I call making sure that students have an opportunity to do what I call enhanced hands-on learning. And because all of this was, in many cases, primary research. For example, one year we did an analysis of all the election trends in Nebraska over a 100-year period.
Wow.
And we took students into different county courthouses and went back to the primary voting records of people and in different communities and looked at trend analysis. That was obviously not in the classroom. And keep in mind, Andrea, most of the time that this program has been in place, at least 30 of the 40 years, was without internet, was without computers. And so the methodology that is used in the program has really changed over the last 40 summers.
That leads me to one of the questions that came up when I asked. We have a Summer Honors Program alumni group, and I just let those people know that I was interviewing you, and I asked them if they had any questions. And one of the questions that came up was, how do you, over the years, restructure, and know what to keep and what to change? So obviously the internet had something to do with that. What else have the students changed over the years?
Okay, well, that's a really good question, because one of the things that happened over the 40 years is that the students have not changed in the sense of the quality of their ability to work hard, good work ethic, interested in learning, fascinated by new possibilities. There has been that consistency throughout the entire program. In thinking back, Andrea, over the 40 summers, I don't think there was any dramatic change other than in technology, equipment, that came along for some of the classes. For example, in the summer of 1978, there would never have been an opportunity for a class in filmmaking to have taken place,
right?
Because the technology in a portable way would not have allowed that. And so, students haven't changed. Their interests are much broader than they were 40 years ago. And I think that is because of the increase in various types of technology and media. I have found that students, first of all, they wanted to be there. It was a competitive process. They got there, and they're interested in the subject matter in which they find themselves, whether it's in creative writing or if it's in science or geology, whatever it happens to be. And so you don't have to worry about motivating the students. And so that is a tremendous help. And one of the things that I learned very early on was that their appetite for new knowledge, new ways, new strategies, new methodologies for learning just ratcheted up over this entire time period. I have found that there's great flexibility in the way that you approach teaching the class. For example, in this year's class, I always, after the first year in the program teaching, I learned very, very quickly that I had to be over-prepared, because the very first year I was there, I thought I had enough materials to teach for 2 solid weeks. And by Wednesday of the first week, I was out of material.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And so I would rush home every night, no matter where I was, with whom I was a house guest. I would rush home, prepare, research, do whatever I could, keeping in mind no internet, no Google. And so after that, I always came over prepared. And in many times, they even pushed the limits under that set of circumstances, because we're talking about such a bright young group of young men and women. And then the other thing that did change was their awareness when they came into the class of the world around them was much more profound and deep today than it was in the 80s, simply because they've been exposed in ways that, students, and myself included, were not exposed to in the early days of the program.
It's really interesting. It's sounding to me like you're not, a lot of times you hear these sort of kids these days kind of comments about the younger generation, and what I'm not hearing that from you at all.
No, you will never find me saying that. First of all, students know when you care. Students know when you are sincere. Students know if you respect them. And if you have those 3 elements introduced from the very beginning of the class, and I'm talking about not just in this particular program, but I think it's still true today in the setting in most high schools for all students.
Yeah.
And then they will rise to the occasion if they feel those 3 things are in place. And I never doubted at any time in my teaching in Nebraska that there was ever a student that didn't want to be there. Now, that's not to say that once you get to know the students, especially by the second week, you can tell if something happened the day before and they were not quite, on focus. And then because the program is so all-encompassing with emotional and counseling support, we were able to do some interventions over the years with some students that would have fallen through the cracks had it been a regular academic year.
It's a special place. There's no doubt about it. And they're going to miss you, I'm sure. So, Doug, I'm curious about what you're doing now and how you got to where you're at now. Like, what is the story arc of Doug's career?
Well, if someone had told me that when I started teaching in 1965, that I would have walked the hallowed halls of academia from K through doctoral programs, or that I would be working in the corporate world as a leadership coach, I just would have said, you're crazy. And so I have been blessed, Andrea, with my path being fairly clear through most of my life. And I've been very fortunate in that I have had opportunities that afforded me some diversion from what my original academic career would have been. I think teaching is a noble profession. And putting everything aside in my life that I've done from a professional standpoint, the place where I have gotten the greatest joy and the greatest amount of satisfaction has been in teaching. And I've taught at all levels, that you can teach in. And I've been blessed with students that were receptive. But along the way, I was a classroom teacher. Then I was a school administrator for a number of years, and along the way, embedded in that, even when I was in administration, I was teaching in higher ed as an adjunct professor. And then that led me to the central office at a large school system here in West Virginia, where I was working with teachers here again, and as well as students, in making sure that they were prepared for the tasks of the day. I retired early because I had an opportunity to become Dean of Students at the University of Charleston here in West Virginia. It was an unusual set of circumstances. I was called. I was still full-time employed, and the president of the university at that time said, "We need you here at your alma mater to help us move forward." I said, "Okay, let's talk." And so I made the decision. It was a very difficult decision because I loved my job, what I was doing. I had great opportunities at that particular point, but I went into higher ed and was a dean at two colleges or universities over a period of a little over 10 years. One at the University of Charleston, which was an immense joy in my life. And once again, I got to work directly with students, but in a different way of leading and teaching.
I'm curious, you said that they called you and said, "We need you." Why do you think, and why did they say that they needed you? What did you have to bring to that situation, whatever it was, that they would call you?
Well, it's very interesting about my professional career, and to some degree in my personal life. I've always been the person that had the skill set, God-given skill set, to be able to bring people together to have conversations. And so, therefore, they felt that they needed someone on campus that could help them grow and become a residential university, and also to expand. University had gotten themselves into a little bit of, trouble with the community because the university wanted to expand into the neighborhood, and the neighborhood felt that they were being encroached upon. And so the president called me and said, "Can you help us do this?" And so I did. I came on board. The community had protested, did not want anybody to build or change the campus. They wanted to keep it the same. But we also knew that we had to build new residence halls if we were going to expand the student body and become residential. So over a period of about 9 months, I literally, and this is no exaggeration, sat in the living room or the kitchen or the patio of every home that bordered the university. Wow. It took me 6 months to do that, along with everything else that I had responsibility for. And so from the time I started in September to the May at the end of the academic year, I got the approval of the neighbors, the zoning board, the city council, and there were no negative votes.
Wow.
I've always had, I don't want to be prideful here, but I've always been able to get people to talk and to listen.
Yeah.
And to present both sides. And so that has followed me throughout my life, not only in that setting, but also when I was the Dean of Students in the Marshall Islands in the South Pacific for a couple of years, and able to do that with some organizations in which I've been part of the leadership. So it's been a very interesting journey because I had that reputation.
Yes.
And so I was able to do that, and I feel very happy about that.
I don't think that's, prideful at all. I think it's, being able to own who you are and
Right.
communicate that clearly. And obviously it's a gift that you have that you've been able to give others. And when they know what that is, then they can utilize that gift of yours. And I'm really interested in this because this is the Voice of Influence podcast, right? This is
Right.
about
Right.
voice. It's about what it is that how we communicate and what is unique about our style of communication even that makes us fit for certain things. And so
Right.
the fact that that they look to you for that, it just makes so much sense. You took the Fascinate assessment, which I invite guests to take, and it's just an indication of what your voice is, and how to categorize the way that you communicate. And
Right.
you came out innovation and alert. And I know that passion's up high for you as well, because passion is about relationships. So obviously that makes sense. But then innovation, being willing to take risks and see your way around obstacles.
Yes.
And then alert, crossing every T and dotting the I's, making sure that, I guess it's preventing problems with care. And so it makes so much sense that you would be the perfect person to come in and make sure that every single one of those, to sit on every one of those porches and have those conversations and make sure that there were no votes. I love it. It's brilliant.
Well, and one of the things that I wanted to, if I may take that as a point, I helped co-author a book several years ago about the concept of deliberation in higher education, along with a few other people. And I want to talk with you about one of the things that I've learned in that journey, working and being innovative and thinking outside the box. And yes, I am a risk taker. I was not surprised by the results of the Fascinate tool.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I feel very passionate about, and that is the whole concept of deliberation and civic discourse, conversations. And, it has a variety of names. And one of the things that I've championed in my life and work, especially now in my business, transformation specialist, working and coaching with CEOs, leaders, and across a broad spectrum in education and in government and business and the nonprofit world. And there are four things that I think make influence more powerful, if you will, Andrea.
Oh, please. That'd be great.
I call these the 4 P's of leadership. And the first P is called plant. Basically plant the idea, i.e. the seed, and you had to tend to it and nurture it as needed. You can't plant it, in other words, in the context of learning in the classroom or working with a leader whose organization is in a little bit of trouble. You can't plant something if you don't tend to it and you don't nurture it. And so what many leaders do, I think, across the whole spectrum of leadership, not only in this culture, because I've worked in a number of countries overseas, and this is true there also. So it's the first P is plant. The second P is process. You've got to work the process of the idea, giving it time. I have found that in the corporate world, in particular, you have leaders that understand process, but they don't give it time to sort of rise. If if you and I were making biscuits, we have to let the dough rise before, you cut them and put them in the oven. So you've got plant, you've got process. The third P is what I call, you've got to temper your leadership with patience as the idea, the seed takes root and develops. If you don't have patience as a leader, your influence either is never there or your influence wanes over time. So we've got plant, process, patience. And then the fourth one, which for me is the easiest because the kind of personality and style I have, and that is you've got to model personal relationship for those responsible for developing and implementing the new idea in seed. So it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the podcast, and that is that when a student knows the teacher respects them, teacher likes them, the teacher respects them, the personal process is there. And these are my 4 Ps. And so when I'm coaching and working, this is one of the things that I talk with people about.
Oh, yeah, that's really, really good stuff. So is that in this book that you helped co-author?
Yes.
And what is the name of that book?
The name of the book is called Deliberation and the Work of Higher Education. We wrote this book with a wonderful research foundation called the Kettering Foundation out of Dayton, Ohio, and it has a 2008 date. And you can call the Kettering Foundation, and you can get the book.
Well, I will. If there's a link to that, I will definitely link that in the show notes.
Okay.
So that people can go get that. Those 4 Ps. This idea of having good conversations that could result in change. That it's a hard thing to accomplish, but we need people like you out there facilitating these conversations and helping us dialogue so that we can move forward together. So I'm just really, really glad that you're out there talking about this sort of thing.
Well, I appreciate that, and but it's been one of the mainstays. I didn't formalize the 4 Ps until we started writing the book, and so it has become a cornerstone of my consulting work, and it also guides how I've taught also. Yeah.
The deep need that people have to know that you care and that you're sincere and that you respect them. That just opens up hearts to be able to receive whatever it is that you're wanting to offer.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
So let's see, you were kind of in the middle of talking about your work as a dean of students at a couple of different universities, and then where did you go from there?
Well, I retired the second time. I have formally retired twice, which is, and so I thought I would do some traveling and just relax with my family. I was beginning to have grandchildren, and 3 months into the process, I knew I was going berserk, and I had lost my wife to breast cancer during this period, and I knew myself well enough that I had to have a goal. I had to have something that I did each day, and so to that extent, said I can't do this. And then I had a couple of friends, and I said to them, I think let's see if anybody wants us. And so what we were able to do was we formed this company called Transformation Specialist Limited Partnership. And so for the last about 10 years, we've been doing consulting work. The other individuals that I pull in to help all have full-time jobs and do their own thing. And I'm sort of like the legs that has the mobility to go out and do. So we've worked in higher ed, we've worked in for-profit business, we've worked with nonprofits, and we've never advertised one time, Andrea, and it's all been a word of mouth. And so we, at any one time, we can manage the complexity of maybe 4 to 6 clients. And then at the same time, I went back to the University of Charleston and helped teach in their MBA program.
With transformation specialists, do you have a stated mission?
It is a very simple phrase. It says strengths-based strategies for success. And so we take the positive approach to working with an organization. We go in and we do lots of analysis. We start off with what is called an OHA, an organizational health appraisal or audit, to find out what they're successful with, and then any challenges that may exist within the organization. And so over the last almost 10 years, we've gone in and worked with organizations that may have we were with them for 6 months, but we've had some clients that we've been with for 5 years.
Okay, so your organizational health analysis, and then you help them move forward and move toward organizational health?
Yes. What we do is that we go in and we do an analysis of their services, products. We go in and look at efficiencies. We look at the landscape of the actual physical layout of the facilities. If it's, and we've worked with some organizations that have multiple facilities. And then you look at, and so we go in and we start off with the leadership team of determining their social styles. We've got some instruments that we use to look at what are their strengths. And so we always approach it up front not from a deficit standpoint, but from a strength standpoint.
Yeah.
Because most organizations, you will find, what's wrong with you. Let's take you to the doctor and give you a physical from that standpoint. And so we do the reverse of that. It's almost like a preventative care management program. If our medical world looked like that.
Kind of positive psychology, starting with strengths instead of weaknesses. Yeah. And so do you use the Strengths Finder in your?
Yes. Yes. Finder is one of the base we use. We also use David Merrill's social styles. We also use the Maslach burnout inventory. One of the things that we have found in many, many cases is that the individuals may be burnt out. And sometimes we've gone into organizations and of course we can only make recommendations. If the organization that is not willing to listen to us, we make a very quick decision and we exit almost within the first 3 to 5 weeks of working with an organization. And that's only happened to us in all of these years twice.
How can you tell?
Well, when they don't take your suggestions and your observations, and there's always a but you don't understand, or but this happened, caused that to take place, and so it all starts with the CEO and the management team of the organization, and so what we do is that we absolutely make sure that everybody in leadership capacity and down 1 or 2 tiers in management know what their strengths are, and know what their social style is, know what their EQI is, emotional quotient. We do an EQI inventory, and so what happens is that we have found that if you have an organization, let's be hypothetical here. Let's say an organization has 6 managers and 4 people that are the CEO, COO, and CFO. And if all of them are drivers, guess what happens? They kill each other. There's arguments. They don't get along. They can't figure out what it is. If they're all analyticals, they're always seeking to have more data, more information before any decisions are made. So once we identify, and everybody knows everybody else's style and their strengths, you don't hide that. And in fact, we've gone into organizations where they post them. We post them on the entrance into their office or their cubicle.
Yeah.
And so, you would find out very quickly that I am, for example, under using David Merrill's work, I am an expressive, which you probably would not, you would understand that.
Uh-huh,
and that is, an expressive is someone that's intuitive, thinks outside the box, rebels a little bit. Have you considered that? Have you considered this? And if you've got all four quadrants and all the potential strengths out of strengths finders in your organization, you can then have a balanced leadership team, creating an awareness of why you don't necessarily get along with someone. Would be a driver may not get along with an analytical because the driver wants to process and get things done rather quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And analytical doesn't want to do that. They always want more information or data. And so we massage that and work with that. As I said, we have worked with and had great opportunities even in the corporate world. And of course, that was an interesting experience, transitional experience for us, in that sometimes the table is not necessarily set the same way as it is in education in particular,
Okay.
which is, of course, my foundational work is from there. And so what happens over time is that we find out what your strengths are, how to balance that, and we've gotten several organizations to make it part of their HR process. If, for example, you're looking for, you've got 5 divisions in your organization, and they're all going really well. Your division head retires or moves on to another position, and you want to maintain balance in the style and strengths of that person. You then look at that as a deciding factor if everything else is equal.
So how do we fit together and finding the right fit?
How we fit together. And then, because going back, to the whole concept of influence, is that this absolutely helps influence the direction of the organization. And we have found that we can make you healthy. And we have found out over time. In fact, one of my cohorts in this is a gentleman by the name of Anthony Marchese. And he has just written a book that I used in the program in SHP this summer. And it's called Design. It is a book that plays upon our experiences and how it really works. Because the full title of the book is called Design, an Owner's Manual for Learning, Living, and Leading with Purpose. Mm-hmm. And so we have found that we each have a unique design, and so we use that to create awareness. And I was able to do that this summer, I think fairly successfully, with the students that I had in my class in Nebraska.
And so that awareness that we're uniquely designed, and even I assume, finding out what that design is, what does that awareness do for people, in your opinion, or in your experience?
Well, I mean, it's really, truly an aha moment. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, the book was written not with high school students in mind, to tell you the truth. It was written, for the college level and, people in career work of whatever level the field it happened to be. And so what I wanted to see if it was applicable to high school students. And guess what, Andrea? I found out it sure was.
Yeah.
And it was one of the great aha moments of my 40 plus years in Nebraska. It was just absolutely wonderful, and I'm still hearing from the students saying that this has changed my life. And I don't think that there's anything more rewarding for a teacher than to have a student say that to you.
Why do you think they said that?
Well, because we go back to how much time we were able to spend together.
Yeah.
So we had the luxury of time in dissecting this book and doing exercises and different strategies and processes in the 2 weeks that allowed them to look at things. For example, one of the things that we talked about is the whole concept of wonder. And the literature is very specific about wonder. We lose it generally by the ages of 10 to 11. And so when I presented the very first series of exercises, which dealt with wonder, they all looked at me and said, "What do you mean wonder?" I mean, they knew what it meant. And I said, what were those things that absolutely excited you when you were 4 years old or 7 or 9 years old? And they had to do some thinking about it. And but eventually, remember the 4 P's, it's about process and patience. And so what happened was there was almost like a cathartic kind of exercise, catharsis for the students, in which they said, I did lose that. I didn't do this. I don't do that any longer. So that was one thing that we did. And then the other one was that the book talks about birthright gifts.
Yeah.
And that we're all born with birthright gifts, but we have a tendency in our culture to play them down after you get so old, a certain age. And the book details some examples of that. And I found out that with the 13 students that I had this summer, they fell into the same category. They had forgotten about some of their birthright gifts. And for example, now I want you to listen to this. I had one young, wonderful young woman in the class. And so in the introductory kinds of exercises we do the first morning of the first week, she said, well, I speak 4 languages. And I looked at her, and so did everybody else. And she has self-taught herself Ukrainian, German, Japanese, and she's taking Spanish academically.
Wow. Besides speaking English.
Yeah, besides speaking English.
Yeah.
I mean, I was stupefied. It was one of the few moments in working with gifted students that it sort of made me stop and pause. That, oh wow, I'm not that bright. I couldn't do that. And so she discovered that she has the birthright gift of linguistics. But no one had ever actually fully developed that or talked to her about that. And so we did some research on that for her.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That is good stuff. Yeah, I think that I just resonate with so much of what you're talking about. And I got a chance to look at the book last night and get a really good feel for it. And I loved it. I loved Design, that book. And the things that you're talking about, I think that that's something that really drives me as well, is that desire to see people figure out where they fit in instead of trying to figure out where they fit in, figure out how they fit together. And,
right.
And realizing that, I think even for myself, when I was younger, for sure, there's this tension inside of younger people, I think, especially, between trying to figure out if it's okay to be who they are and yet wanting everybody to be like them. And so it's hard for them to know, to be able to respect the fact that somebody else is different and that's okay. And there's a good way that we can fit together. And, that whole concept is it's so important, and in our formation of our purpose and our identity, and understanding how that plays out in our lives, and how we can turn that into, something that comes out as a voice, and that it make a difference as a voice of influence. So, man, I just love all of this and love what you're doing. And is there anything else that you had thought about ahead of time that you wanted to mention today?
Well, I just think that, in closing, from my standpoint, I believe all of us have the capacity to continue to grow and to learn. Culture has a way of sometimes limiting what we can do.
Yeah.
Because they say, by this age, you should have done that. You stop study, go get a job, have a family, and live happily ever after. And I think that we live, Andrea, in an era in which learning now and opportunities for learning is at its richest point in the history of mankind. And I believe that if we can figure out ways of capturing that and redesigning our public schools to include some of the kinds of things that we have talked about today, we really make some changes. See, I believe that this is going to make a huge difference. I'm going to tell you what I'm getting ready to do this fall. I'm working with the school system in which they listened to me, and we've been working on this process for several years, and they finally agreed for us to go into a school system with 2 high schools and 3 middle schools to begin to introduce the concept of understanding self and design as part of the regular curriculum. And so we've committed ourselves to a 5-year research study to be able to do this in this school system. And so I will start training a core group of 24 teachers in these 6 schools that I'll be working. It's 3 high schools and 3 middle schools. I misspoke there. And so we're identifying 6 teachers at each of those schools to be trained in knowing about strengths, about social styles, a little basic kinds of skill set to identify issues that may impact learning in the classroom. And we're going to start off with a control group of about 90 students and follow them and see if we not only can improve their ability to learn, but also enhance and decrease the dropout rate, because this school system is in an area of West Virginia in which the opioid, unfortunately, epidemic and crisis is hitting hard, and it's in the coal fields. And we believe that if we can make a change in those kinds of cultural settings, that we can do it any place in the country.
That's so exciting. Those students are just so blessed that they're going to get to be a part of that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Now, before we go, I do have one more question for you. And this one really comes from one of your fellow instructors at the Summer Honors Program.
Okay.
And I love this question. And I think it's just, this is a great way to end it, I think. Doug, you have the most wonderful character. Kind, out of your way polite, humorous, generous, appreciative, and tough as nails when it comes to discipline and work. How much of your well-recognized leadership skills would you attribute to character, and how much to formal education?
Wow. I mean, that is an unbelievably structured question, and I appreciate the thoughts behind that. I believe that if you have a centered family, your character evolves in the first 5 to 8 years of your life. And if you have firm grounding with principled parents, and the family as a whole is nurturing and respectful of you, that is sort of like one of the cornerstones or part of the foundation of your potential as a human being. And I one of the things that I believe that, and I had to work at this because early on in my life, I was undisciplined in the sense that I wanted to be a little bit of everything for everybody. And I had to figure out, to step back and figure out, where do your strengths lie? And this was long before StrengthsFinder or even some of the positive psychology research that's in the last 25 years. And I said to myself, I've got to figure this out. And so I was able to do that because I had strong support initially from my immediate growing up family. And then I had it with my wife, my beautiful, wonderful Barbara. And so we together, our marriage was a partnership, and therefore we approached raising our sons in a partnership mode. And so we continued to do that, but we had very, very high expectations of our boys. And I'm proud to say that they're done very, very well, and I'm just unbelievably blessed to have that. So I think it basically is a combination of continued learning. I still was taking, Andrea, formal classes until 3 years ago, and I'm 73. So I basically I started grade school when I was 5. And so I basically was in some kind of a learning, formal or informal learning mode for 65 years of my life up until, that point. And, but you've got to have people that believe in you also. And if you've got someone that believes in you, and I think this goes back to the very first part of our conversation, and that is the students know if you care for them, and if your heart's there to help them do whatever they need to do. And I think respect is part of it. But boy, they've got to know that you have strong expectations.
That's a great way to end this conversation. Doug, thank you so much. Thank you for your voice of influence with students and on the world today, and in organizations, and for being here today on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, listener, influencer listening, you just got a lot of wisdom dropped on you, and I'll be definitely putting all of the links to the things that Doug mentioned, the books that he mentioned, and his own information in the show notes. And so I encourage you to go care, be sincere and respectful, and make your voice matter more.
You've reached the conclusion of today's episode, but we encourage you to visit voiceofinfluence.net for more resources, show notes, and ways to immediately empower your voice with updated, actionable tips to build your compelling communication strategy. Again, that's voiceofinfluence.net. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to helping you make your voice matter more.